right? So I think even if, for example, you have like a very good reasons, a very good solutions that we want to implement one child policy in Indonesia, but I think you should add more the justification as to why the one child policy in Indonesia is something that is justified on the ground. Number three, add new contextualization or picturization of the condition that brings more urgency to the problem. What does this look like? So the idea about picturization, this looks like an example, for example, right? Maybe you can say that why protecting endangered languages are very important. The reason why protecting endangered languages are very important simply because we have more than 14,000 languages, for instance. However, 7,000 of them are dying, right? This is the reason why the half of our total number of languages in Indonesia, for instance, are currently dying. So this kind of example that you give is something that we can call as picturization. This also looks like in a motion of gender equality, right? Gender equality. Maybe what you want to picturize is that how the women are currently struggling, how women, for example, are currently facing a structural discrimination on the basis of their gender. Like, for example, women have less access towards managerial position. Women have less access to be the CEO or the business leader in a company, for instance, right? So this kind of picturization is something that gives an urgency that women are indeed in need of assistance gitu. Nah, jadi yang kayak cara kalian nge-portray how women are basically very struggling right now, very oppressed in the current status quo, is by giving them picturization. Picturizations are just like examples, whether or not what you're saying is true, right? So things like women are not given equal opportunity in sport events, things like women are paid less for the exact same jobs that they do with men, for example. So these are the picturization and also the context that give a much more grounded analysis to the educator. Fourthly, bring your rebuttals to opponent teams. What the closing team should not do is that to bring nothing new to the debate, okay? So please always bring something new. Either you want to bring new example, new contextualization, new characterization, it's perfectly fine. New argument, new response to the opening opposition, it's fine. What you should not do is that bring nothing new to the debate, because if you bring nothing new to the debate, most likely the credit will go to the opening government instead of you as a closing team. Okay, let's dissect one by one. What should you do? If you're a prime minister, there are two things that you should do. Number one, you need to be able to set an extremely clear debate, right? This includes, for example, identifying the problem. What is the current problem? Like in the motion of this house would give death penalty to corruptors, okay? So let's just practice. This house would give death penalty to corruptors. What do you see as a problem? Thus, the motion is now discussed. What do you see as a problem? Thus, the motion exists. What do you see as a problem? Kenapa sih ada mosi this house would give death penalty to corruptors? What are the problems sampai mosi ini ada kayak gitu? Are there anyone would like to try to answer? Enggak, gue pilih nih. No, just kidding. Anyone wants to answer? Coba. This house would give death penalty to corruptors. What are the problems sampai mosinya ini ada kayak gitu? Ayo.
Mungkin dari teman-teman Universitas Mataram atau Universitas Jenderal Sudirman bisa menjawab nih pertanyaan dari Karen. Teman-teman dari UIN Mataram dan Universitas Brawijaya, silakan. Oke, itu ada jawaban di chat box, Kak.
Okay, Hazani, corruption case that high, Kak. I think that's true, yeah. See, that's what we identifying. Okay, that's what we call, sorry, what is this? Okay, that's what we call as identifying problem. Yeah, the reason as to why there is a topic, the reason as to why there is a motion says this house would give death penalty to corruptors. It's because there is an increasing number of corruption cases that exist in the status quo. This is the reason why ada notion, ada naratif bahwa we want to give death penalty agar supaya yang kayak we are strict, agar supaya yang kayak kita terlihat strong, for example, dan sebagainya, you know, things like that. Nah, jadi yang kayak those what we call as a problem identification. Number two, you also need to have solutions and also mechanism. Mechanism are steps on how do you do stuff. Later on, we're gonna go there. Lastly, you have goal. What do you want to achieve in the debate, right? And obviously, you should bring arguments. Arguments are sets of reasons as to why do you support or oppose certain motions. Leader of opposition, provide counterbalance, provide counter stance or solution. Like, for example, this house would give death penalty to corruptors. Maybe you do not like that idea, but what is your alternative? Okay, jadi jangan hanya ngomongin tentang yang kayak death penalty is bad, but what is your alternative? What is your counter stance in opposition side of the house? You
Halo Kak Randy, sorry, your connection is bad, I think.
saying that we have a very weak law, it doesn't exist. Untuk panitia, don't record and stop ya. Kayak that's quite disturbing. Just record the entire, the entire presentation. That's fine. Number two, if it does exist, like what opening government said, is something that is true, try to ask, is status quo currently working or can the status quo be improved? If, for example, the status quo can be improved, thus you don't need the motion, right? If the status quo can be improved, thus you don't need the solution offered by the opening government side of the house. Like, for example, opening government mentioned, we want to push for death penalty. The reason why we want to push for death penalty, it's because our law is bad, right? However, the status quo can be improved. Like, for instance, maybe you don't have to go to the extent of imposing death penalty. You can do something else, maybe fixing the prison system, maybe restructurizing the police, for example, or maybe strengthening the power of KPK, right? These are the type of things that you can improve in the status quo. Thus, the number of corruption cases can be decreased, right? So ya, jadi itu tuh membuktikan bahwa mosi yang dibilang oleh tim pemerintah saying that we need to impose that penalty itu jadi enggak begitu necessary at the end of the day. Thirdly, will the solution offered by government team effective to solve the problem? Like, try to ask, okay, sure, maybe the number of the corruption cases is very high. Maybe that is true. But the question is that, is your problem effective? Gitu kan? Atau enggak justru yang kedua, maybe that worsen the condition, maybe it worsens the situation, and so on and so forth. So yeah, these are the things that you can exploit juga. Answer the rebuttal from your opponent. Rebuild your what you can do as the deputy prime minister and also deputy leader of opposition. The second speaker and the second speaker of the government team and also opposition are four things. One, answer the rebuttal from your opponent. Number two, rebuild your team case that has been attacked by your opponent. Number three, bring your rebuttals and also arguments. Number four, tell the judge why the opening debate answered the most important questions. Okay, these are the things that you need to do as the second speaker. Okay. As a member of government and also member of opposition, first of all, I think this is very crucial for you to explain where closing team different from the opening team. Kira-kira perbedaan closing team sama opening team itu di mana? And then bring your rebuttals and then bring your arguments to the table, okay? Keep in mind, number one, don't forget to complete your opening stance. This is the formula ya. Every debaters are only given 7 minutes to deliver their speech. It means they cannot say everything on their head. Berarti kalian harus tetap assume bahwa pasti ada yang kurang, either itu in terms of examples, in terms of mechanization, and so on and so forth, pasti ada yang kurang. And I think it's very important for you to complete the stance of your opening team. Number two, explain what is actually the most important thing to be discussed, and don't forget to link it back that what you think is important is your case gitu. Jadi yang kayak jangan, ini kan ngomongin tentang explain what is actually the most important thing. Do not just explain, okay, this is the most important thing, tapi you also need to make sure the most important thing is the identity that you bring as a closing team. Okay. Number three, what is lacking from the opening team? Jadi yang kayak jangan lupa untuk bilang apa sih kekurangan opening, and then karena opening kurangnya ini kita bakalan penuhin, kita bakalan lengkapin dengan argumen-argumen ini kayak gitu. Okay? As a whip speaker, bring rebuttals, give biased conclusion of the debate, explain how should the debate be judged. Jadi yang kayak contoh, kayak okay judges, this is how you should judge the debate. Two things. Number one, you should judge on the basis of principle and why closing team wins the debate. And number two, you need to judge in terms of its impact. Who gives the most impact in this debate, right? So explain how the debate should be judged by the adjudicator, and explain why your team answers the most important thing in the debate. Setting up the debate. There are two types of motions. Number one, we have proposal motion. Proposal motion is basically there is a problem that exists and it requires solution. Contoh, this house would intervene North Korea. Jadi it requires solution. It required an action. Maybe there is something problematic in North Korea. That's why what you want to do as an action adalah to intervene North Korea. In value judgment, it is a debate about evaluation, whether or not a phenomenon brings benefit or harm. What are the example of this? The example of this house regrets the rise of consumerism, right? This house regrets the rise of consumerism. You are not required to do anything. You are not required to do an action. Kalian gak disuruh ngapa-ngapain. You just need to evaluate whether consumerism is regrettable or not. Okay, jadi yang kayak itu. Note, just because it is a value judgment debate does not mean it doesn't need to have mechanism. Atau enggak, nomor dua, just because it is a proposal debate does not mean it doesn't need a philosophy or principle arguments. Okay, jadi yang kayak itu tuh masih bisa apply and will be credit equally. Jadi even if you have a proposal debate, for example, contoh, this house would intervene North Korea. This is a proposal debate, right? But it's okay for you to have philosophy or principle argument, like maybe saying why humanity, why international community have the obligation, the principal obligation to intervene North Korea, for instance, right? So it's okay for you to have a philosophical argument in a proposal motion, and it's okay for you to have mechanism in a value judgment motion. Definition. Giving definition does not mean you have to translate each word of the motion based on the dictionary. Defining a motion means you give a clear explanation what the debate is about, right? Definition can be given in few ways. One, translating the keywords in a more understandable words. Like, for example, this house celebrates the rise of feminist cult. You need to explain to me the definition. What does it mean to celebrate something? And what does it mean? What does feminist cult mean? Kayak gitu. Atau enggak, contoh, this house regrets the decline of highly integrated family. What is highly integrated family? How does it look like? This is the reason as to why you need to define the keywords in a more understandable words, okay? Number two, providing picturization of the problem or the phenomenon and what you will do, right? Like, for example, this house would intervene in Syria. Maybe you define what is intervene, what does intervene mean, and then what will you do by that intervention, by that intervening Syria kayak gitu. Clarify rule of the debate or limitation, specify where and when this debate takes place, but this does not mean you have to be very specific. You have to be as general as possible. Like, for example, what are the example of this? When you say this house would give, this house would this house would limit the number of political party, gitu. This house would limit the number of the political party. Do not just say, for example, you takes do not just say, limitation of the debate. We are going to limit the political party participation in presidential election only in the year of 2024, gitu. Nah, jadi yang kayak do not, it's very specific timeline that you only want to limit the participation of a lot of multiple political party in 2024. Like, what is so unique about 2024 presidential election, for example? So please be general as possible. Like, you are going to limit the number of participation of political party in all presidential election, not only in Indonesia, not only in specific timeline, but in all countries that have multi-party system and also the one that have functional democracy. So yeah, I clarify the debate and the limitation, but don't be too specific because it can be a boomerang for you. Definition challenge is not recommended. Definitional challenge is not recommended, okay? However, you can do that if, for example, it is undebatable, or probably self-proving, and even has no link to the motion, right? So what does undebatable actually means? Like, for example, they try to define abortion is a very, very sinful act, right? This is not the definition of abortion. This is the reason why this is undebatable. Because if this is sinful, and this is seen as something that is morally incorrect or even morally flawed, ya ini jadi undebatable gitu loh. Of course you want to ban something yang menurut lo, for example, something yang maybe not good for the society and so on and so forth. Thus the definition of abortion should not like abortion is the activity that is very, very sinful. No. Abortion can be said as an activity where you choose not to give birth to your fetus, for example, and there is a moral dilemma among abortion issue. Jadi yang kayak jangan langsung kayak tembak kalau misalkan kayak ini sinful, thus we ban it because it becomes undebatable at the end of the day. Stance is about what you are proposing and what you are trying to prove, gitu. Contoh, this house regrets the rise of choice feminism, atau enggak, this house would set Truth and Reconciliation Commission to the victim of 1998. Jadi yang kayak, for example, stance-nya itu kalian bisa nge-set up TRC, dan juga prohibits people from going to trial. Jadi yang kayak instead of going to trial, you will process the 1998 incidents through the setting up of TRC, for example. This is your stance. Atau enggak, contoh, this house regrets the rise of choice feminism. Your stance adalah to prove that the concept of choice is bad in achieving the goal of feminism. So this is what you're trying to prove in the entire identity, right? This is jenis-jenis stance ya. Contoh tadi yang ini ya. This house would ban abortion, for example. Nah, jadi stance yang paling kiri itu complete ban on all abortion. Yang setengah-setengah itu tuh yang kayak ban abortion in most of the cases. Nah, ini tuh nggak recommended, oke? Okay? Kayak in most of the cases. Karena kalau misalkan in most of the cases, pasti kalian juga mempunyai burden. Yang kayak apa sih cases yang lain yang dimana abortion is not banned, for example, kayak gitu. Nah, jadi yang kayak ban abortion, mending complete all abortion aja. Mau dalam bentuk apapun itu, you want to ban abortion, bukan hanya yang kayak setengah doang kayak gitu, setengah bentuk abortion doang yang kayak it isn't allowed. Yang di tengah itu tuh allow abortion to rape victims and to protect mother's life. Jadi ini tuh yang kayak ya in the middle ground. Terus yang kayak ada juga yang kanan itu tuh permission on all abortion before the second trimester. Nah, jadi yang kayak kalian mengizinkan abortion tapi yang kayak hanya sebelum second trimester kayak gitu. Nah, I mean like the question is what makes it so special? Nah, jadi kan itu nambah-nambahin burden kan, atau enggak yang terakhir itu permission on all abortion. Jadi what I recommend you when you debate in whatever competition, you should do this. Whether your stance itu tuh you wanna complete ban on all abortion atau enggak you wanna give permission on all forms of abortion, okay? Jadi yang kayak mending go bold aja, either you go to the most left or you go to the most right. Opposition approach. When you become an opposition, this can be your strategy. One, saying that the problem that mentioned by the government side does not exist. Number two, maybe the problem exists, but the status quo can solve that. Our current activity, our current progress, our current politicians can eventually solve the problem that currently exists in the status quo. Number three, that the problem exists, but the government is only making things worse. This is also can be your approach and your strategy on how do you win the debate. Thirdly, that the problem exists, but the opposition has a better alternative. This is also something that you can add. Argument and rebuttal 101, ya. An argument can be philosophical or practical. Both argument should be equally valued by the adjudicator. Okay, jadi jangan berpikir bahwa, for example, I want to bring practical arguments. Why? Because it is more valued. No, that is not true. Philosophical argument and practical argument are equally valued by the adjudicator, okay? So even if you have, for example, a practical motion or policy motion, it is perfectly fine for you to invest in philosophical argumentations, simply because philosophical and practical arguments are equally valued by the adjudicator. Okay, an argument should answer to question one, how is the argument true? Like, for example, if you want to say certain claim that Apple is better than Samsung atau enggak Samsung is better than Apple, you should explain why is it true, right? Why is it true? Is it like the specs or the cam or the customer service, for example, dan sebagainya kayak gitu. Jadi yang kayak do not just have a claim, tapi please prove why your claim is true. Yang dua, why is the argument important? Comparing why your argument is more important than opponent's government. Jadi yang kayak do not just say, okay guys, Apple is cool, tapi give comparative, okay? Give comparative as to why and explain why your argument is important. Karena kalian itu lawannya bukan hanya opposition doang, tapi yang kayak your own bench, opening government sama closing government itu juga berantem. Kayak gitu loh. Nah, karena mereka berantem, try to explain that your arguments are more important than them. Kayak gitu. Rebuttal itu ada 3 yang paling general digunakan ya. Yang pertama ada yang namanya negation, deny that their claim is correct. Jadi yang kayak kalian ngedeny bahwa apa yang mereka bilang itu benar karena basically that is not true according to you gitu. Terus yang kedua, neutralize, explain why their concern also applicable on their case. Jadi yang kayak government bilang harm kita adalah A gitu. Padahal harm A ini ada juga ternyata di kasus tim pemerintah kayak gitu. Jadi yang kayak don't do that. Please do that. Neutralizing juga bisa. Or even if itu adalah assuming their argument can work, why the outcome will not be achieved the way they want it. Jadi yang kayak even if what you're saying is true, tapi kenapa goal kalian itu nggak bakal ke-achieve. This is also a form of rebuttal that you can try. Important link back. Link back is to show 3 things. Why your argument is relevant, which part of your previous speaker's case are you strengthening, jadi yang kayak apa yang masih berdiri dan sebagainya, and which part of your opponent's case are you destroying, kayak gitu. And this can also be used to show why that you have said is important for the debate. Jadi yang kayak this is what we basically call as a link back. Ingat ya guys, link back di BP debate is very very important to remind the adjudicator that you say things, that you said A and you said B dan sebagainya kayak gitu. Okay, jadi yang kayak don't forget to always always put a link back. You have 4 teams in a round, and it's very important to remember every single identity of every teams. Therefore, it's very important for you to give link back so that judges can remind your identity. Proposition fiat. Proposition fiat is an advantage for government team that two things. Technicalities is assumed to be available and the proposal will be passed in Congress or Parliament. Contoh, this house would legalize marijuana kayak gitu. Nah, kalian itu nggak bisa membawa opposition, nggak bisa membawa argumen kita nggak mau legalize marijuana kayak gitu, karena nggak mungkin lolos di parlemen atau enggak karena ini tuh nggak mungkin untuk diimplementasiin. Enggak, you cannot do that kayak gitu. Jadi yang kayak jadi yang kayak itu jadi yang kayak itu nggak bisa. Therefore karena itu nggak bisa, jadinya I'm reading my text tadi. You cannot say that as an opposition, saying that kita nggak mau mendukung legalization of marijuana itu tuh karena ini nggak bakalan pas di parlemen atau enggak ini tuh bakalan ini tuh bakalan nggak mungkin, technicalities-nya tuh nggak mungkin, pasti semua political party itu nggak ada yang support dan sebagainya. Nah, kalian nggak bisa approach-nya. Karena kenapa? Karena kita mempunyai proposition fiat. Proposition fiat itu adalah kalian, government sama opposition, harus berasumsi bahwa parlemen bisa meloloskan suatu kebijakan bahwa marijuana bisa diloloskan atau enggak marijuana bisa dilegalized kayak gitu. The question of the debate is not about whether or not it will be passed in the parliament, tapi the debate should be if it can pass, do you support it or not? Kayak gitu. If it can pass, do you support it or not? Jadi yang kayak itu guys yang bisa untuk kalian jelasin ya. Karena proposition fiat itu bisa mengasumsikan bahwa it will pass in the parliament. The question is that do you want to support it or not? However, it doesn't assume that states have unlimited funding. Kayak maybe you have the money. Kayak contoh, this house would move to Mars. You can move to Mars. You can assume you can move to Mars. But the question is that do you support moving to Mars or not? Kayak gitu. Kongres or parlemen gives full support. Ini juga nggak bisa diasumsikan ya. Kayak pasti masih bisa diasumsikan bahwa masih ada high tension of discussion yang terjadi dan sebagainya. Okay, probably that's it for the debate 101. You guys have any questions? Yang punya question can feel free untuk ini ya. Can feel free untuk raise hand atau tulis di chat. Okay, there is a question. Can you explain once again about proposition fiat? Oke, jadi kayak gini ya. Dalam motion, this house would move to Mars. Ya, this house would move to Mars. Proposition fiat adalah tim pemerintah bisa mengasumsikan bahwa mereka bisa pindah ke Mars. Oke, jadi yang kayak mereka punya duit untuk pindah ke Mars, mereka punya pesawat untuk pindah ke Mars contohnya. Jadi yang kayak semuanya, semua hal-hal yang dibutuhkan itu tuh ada di pemerintah untuk bisa pindah ke Mars kayak gitu. Oke, untuk bisa pindah ke Mars. Jadi yang kayak kalau misalkan the debate, the motion is about this house would move to Mars, itu tuh opposition tidak bisa mengatakan bahwa kita nggak mau pindah ke Mars karena kita nggak punya duit, kayak gitu. Nggak bisa kayak gitu. Karena kenapa? Karena proposition fiat. Karena tim pemerintah bisa mengasumsikan bahwa mereka punya duit untuk pindah ke Mars. Nah, sebagai tim oposisi, kalian tidak bisa berargumentasi mengatakan bahwa kita tidak mau pindah ke Mars karena kita tidak punya duit. Enggak, karena the debate is not about kita punya money atau enggak, tapi the debate is about do you want to move to Mars or not. Jadi yang kayak you have the money, but the question is that do you want to move to Mars or not, kayak gitu. Jadi the debate is not about kita nggak mau pindah ke Mars karena kita nggak punya duit. Nggak boleh kayak gitu. Karena the motion is about this house would move to Mars gitu. This house would move to Mars. Jadi yang kayak you can assume you have the money, you can assume you have the airplane. The question becomes, do you want to move or not? Kayak gitu. That's what we call as proposition fiat. It is an assumption that all of the necessity that you need to do the motion can exist. Kayak gitu. Bukan rebuttals, itu bukan rebuttals, tapi itu adalah asumsi bahwa motionnya bisa dilakukan. This house would move to Mars. You can assume you can move to Mars, kayak gitu. Gitu. Jadi yang kayak itu ya. Jadi yang kayak itu adalah asumsi bahwa lo bisa melakukan mosi. Kayak gitu. Are there any more questions? How can we know if how can we know if is that proposition fiat or not? How can you know? Ya, you can know kalau misalkan mereka bisa secara eksplisit mengatakan bahwa yang kayak our fiat in this motion adalah A, B, C, kayak gitu. Kalau mereka tidak mengatakan hal tersebut, berarti kalian bisa mempertanyakan hal tersebut, oke? Jadi yang kayak gitu, guys. Jadi yang kayak kalau misalkan mereka bilang hal tersebut secara eksplisit, maybe it can be considered as a proposition fiat. Tapi kalau misalkan enggak, berarti yang kayak itu tuh bisa dipertanyakan lagi ke tim pemerintahnya. Berarti tim pemerintahnya setupnya kurang lengkap. Kak, untuk the last speaker gimana? Maksudnya the last speaker yang mana ya? Soalnya tadi semuanya udah last speaker nih. Ini nih. Ini pembicara satu, Prime Minister sama Leader of Opposition pembicara satu. Pembicara kedua, we call it as deputy. Pembicara satu closing, we call it as member. Pembicara terakhir, whip, we call whip. Ya udah kita panggil dengan whip gitu. Kak, untuk the last speaker gimana? The last speaker itu what is the question? Kak, untuk the last speaker gimana? Yunisa, can you elaborate your question? Kak? Oh, kalau whip speaker, kalau the last speaker ya, I assume the last speaker is whip ya, karena yang kayak whip itu benar-benar the last, no other speakers can go after whip. Jadi yang kayak you are not allowed to bring new arguments, kalian hanya bisa allowed untuk memberikan rebuttals atau response, dan how to deliver it ya tergantung sama format sama cara kalian biasa deliver speech kayak gimana, kayak gitu. Jadi yang kayak nggak ada specific way on how do you deliver it. Cuma kontennya itu tuh harus berisi yang ini, yang ada dua. Satu, pertama kalian harus bisa membawa rebuttal, yang kedua kalian harus bisa memberikan bias conclusion. Explain how the debate should be judged, dan juga explain why your team wins the debate and answer the question. Kayak gitu. Jadi yang kayak nggak boleh ada new arguments, dan yang kayak how do you deliver it, itu tuh depends on your style aja sih. Tuh. Any more questions? Going once. Nanti kalau misalkan nggak ada pertanyaan, nanti ini bakalan di-share di di grup ya. Nanti aku kasih ke panitia. And then you can read lagi untuk presentation-nya. Kalau misalkan udah nggak ada, we are good to go. Dan ada pertanyaan lagi, guys? Okay, if none, I can give it back to the organizing committee.
Oke, thank you kepada Kak Randy atas penjelasannya di technical meeting tadi. Dan saya harap juga karena sudah tidak ada pertanyaan lagi, saya harap sudah clear ya dari teman-teman peserta sekalian. Mungkin kalau ada pertanyaan lebih lanjut bisa hubungi kontak person kami yang sudah tertera yang sebagai admin di grup lomba debat tersebut. Oke, mungkin kita akan ada sesi foto bersama dulu ya. Teman-teman juga bisa on cam untuk sama-sama kita dokumentasi. Oh ya, jangan lupa besok kita ada Oke, jangan lupa besok kita ada pembukaan jam 9 WITA ya, berarti sekitar jam 8 WIB, kemudian dilanjutkan dengan lomba debat. Kita mulai dari besok sampai hari Minggu. Itu aja dulu, dan teman-teman bisa sambil menyalakan kamera ya. Nanti kami dari panitia juga akan mengirimkan rundown-nya kepada teman-teman.
Ayo guys, boleh buka kamera ya guys, biar kita foto terus kita bubar deh. Yuk, yang lain. Ya, thank you Hazani, thank you Salsabila, thank you Andrew, thank you Kittens Protector, thank you Satrio, thank you Tamara, thank you Abida. Yuk, I think it should have been enough people ya. Resti, Egi, Asia, who else I'm gonna call ya. Nisa, debate unsud. Oke. Banyak yang bisa buka kamera ya. Kenapa tadi saya ngomong kalian gak buka kamera? Alright. Yuk, panitia, boleh dihitung ya.
Oke, jadi gue hitung ya, kita sekali aja. Oke, 1, 2, 3. Oke, lagi sekali. Oke. Lagi sekali ya, Pak Operator. Oke. 1, 2, 3. Oke, thank you teman-teman. Jangan lupa kita besok akan mulai pertandingan debatnya. Baiklah, kurang lebihnya saya mohon maaf ya. Saya ucapkan selamat bertanding, have a happy competition, dan semoga beruntung. See you besok. Thank you Kak Randy, thank you teman-teman peserta, dan thank you panitia sekalian. Oke, thank you Kak.